It's getting hotter here in the nation's capital, and no, I am not talking about the extreme heat wave affecting millions of people across this country. I'm talking about the heat affecting one person in particular, the twice impeached, twice indicted former president. That is because at any moment, special counsel Jack Smith could hand Donald Trump his third indictment, this time over his efforts to try to overturn his 2020 election loss. And just as a reminder, Donald, you did lose. And it appears like the heat is getting to Trump as he spent the weekend more focused on rage posting on his Twitter, or should I say X knockoff platform, continuing his attacks on the special counsel, Attorney General Merrick Garland, and the entire DOJ, hurling insults and whining about non-existent election interference. And join me now, Harry Litman, former U.S. Attorney and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General, and Miles Taylor, former Chief of Staff at the Department of Homeland Security in the Trump administration. His new podcast is called The Whistleblowers Inside the Trump Administration. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Harry, I want to start with you. What should we be looking for as signals to whether, if we assume an indictment is coming, whether it's imminent?
It's a great question. I think really there's one main signal, and that is everything they're talking about in terms of witnesses they have to interview, they don't need the grand jury for. But it is customary, and in this case, it will happen that Trump's lawyers will be afforded a final chance to come in and make a last-minute plea, which will not succeed, but they have the opportunity. I don't see why they wouldn't take it. And it's interesting, as you've just noted, that the sort of hysteria levels from Trump are hitting the stratosphere, because this is one thing he would know about. Are we going in? How is this going to work? What is the timing? So to me, the table is set. Smith is ready to go, and that's what the target letter means. Save only. You guys coming in or not? And by the way, you can't take 2 weeks. Come in, have the pitch. After that, here's the indictment.
How often does this pitch ever result in a non-indictment when you come in for that last meeting? How likely is that?
Well, I was U.S. attorney and had those. Occasionally, it would change the charges, perhaps. Not here, only because it's been so carefully thought through. There's a draft indictment that you can be sure has gone up to the front office. So it's not as if DOJ always turns a deaf ear to these things. It might be useful. Here, I think we can be certain that no changes will occur as a result of the meeting, though.
Miles, there is a certain level of hysteria going on amongst Donald Trump's Twitter fingers, or whatever he calls his platform, Truth Social. You know the guy. I don't know him. How afraid do you think he is?
I think he's terrified. I mean, I think that Donald Trump is not worried about this affecting, in general, his overall standing with the MAGA movement. I think what he's worried about, and even jail time, I think really what he's worried about is this is going to give even more ammunition to even more of his political rivals in the primary process. We've already seen Chris Christie and Will Hurd and Asa Hutchinson, seize on his indictments to say, look, the guy may not even be able to take office as president of the United States. He's worried that this is going to make it even more difficult for him. But bigger picture, the concern that I have right now, Joy, though, is as much as Donald Trump is sweating it, and I like to watch him sweating it on TV, we also know what this man does when he gets pushed into a corner, and that is he incites violence. The man has a history of violence. And remember, in the lead up to January 6th, many months before, the year before, he started to talk about coups being afoot and a civil war was in the offing. And we're seeing these menacing videos. And trust me, it's not by accident. Donald Trump's trying to assess if he does have supporters out there willing to commit acts of violence on his behalf. And that's what worries me every time one of these things happens, is that we might see it. Now, I don't think with an indictment you're going to see him exhort people to violence, because Donald Trump will always hope in the end he can be the winner and not the loser. But there's a lot of opportunities in the next year for Donald Trump to become a loser in courts and at the polls and in the court of public opinion. And that moment in which he's decisively declared a loser is the moment we've got to worry about the potential for public safety concerns.
It's a really good point that Miles brings up, Harry, because, Donald Trump has gotten away with saying a lot of threatening things about the prosecutors. And I'm wondering, at what point do they say, you know what, you can't do that anymore? At what point do they actually shut him down? Because, being threatening and sort of talking like a mob boss about Jack Smith et al., that's part of his campaign. At some point, do you think that they say enough?
It's the court that says that. So the court, once he is right now, there's, the Jack Smith will not issue a proclamation enough. And it is really interesting. It's a perfect juxtaposition because his campaign platform seems to be that Smith is deranged and to be going at this. But once a court has jurisdiction, and especially a court in D.C. that is used to this, they can say, look, run your campaign, but do not pollute the jury pool. Run your campaign, but do not endanger the officers of the court, to include Jack Smith. And if you do, I have means to really muzzle you. That eventually, there's got to be many warnings before you do this to a former president. But that eventually means you are going in jail until you stop. So there's a series of things that a judge can do and will do to protect the sanctity of a trial or a judicial process once it is engaged.
And Miles, I mean, you talked about sort of the threat in general, and I think that's very true. But do you think how do you think the Homeland Security Department is thinking about this? Because, you obviously don't have Secret Service for everybody. Jack Smith doesn't have Secret Service. You've got officers of the court involved here. You've got a potential judge involved here. Donald Trump has gone after Jack Smith's wife. How much can the federal government protect these folks? Because then you just broaden it out. Fani Willis is out here. You've got the prosecutor, the DA in Manhattan. There are a lot of moving pieces here. Donald Trump is threatening all of them.
Well, I've actually very recently had conversations with a number of people in top law enforcement positions in the administration about how, in general, going into 2024, with all of the cacophony, all of the charges against Trump, the political volatility, they're scrambling to keep up and to plan for how to address these very unexpected scenarios. But the problem is, it's the lone wolf you worry about the most, and the one that you don't see coming. I mean, just think about when Donald Trump started objecting to the search in Mar-a-Lago, and he started blasting the FBI as the fascist Bureau of Investigation. It's no coincidence that within days, a guy shows up at the field office in Ohio with an AR-15 and a nail gun, and we're lucky that people besides the perpetrator didn't die. It's those exhortations to violence from him and his movement that we've got to be concerned about. But I think that we're going to see more and more of that as it becomes clearer that Jack Smith has damning evidence we don't know about against Donald Trump. We just saw reporting today about how they're actually looking into my former department and how DHS briefed Donald Trump on election security, and he was aware. I was actually there for some of those briefings. Now, to be clear, I haven't spoken to the special counsel, but I was there in briefings for Donald Trump years before the election, where we briefed him on how secure the 2020 election would be and all the efforts we were undertaking. So Trump was aware it would be a secure election, and then somehow conveniently forgot that his administration had helped secure the elections nationwide. It sounds like something the special counsel is going to bring up to talk about his mindset.
Very interesting. Okay, we're going to have you gentlemen back to talk about this as this goes forward, because it looks like it might be happening. Harry Litman, Miles Taylor, thank you both very much.